I've always been fascinated by human behavior. My father was a PhD psychologist, and I always wanted to follow in his footsteps. Initially, that's what I did. I graduated from a university here in Canada, the University of Victoria, with my psychology degree at the ripe age of 21. My first job in the field was a behavioral modification therapist for a young autistic child in his kindergarten and grade 1 classroom. I was eager and excited to start working in the field. The teachers at the school were completely incompetent at handling the young child's outbursts. The other parents in the classroom were angry that they had to deal with this young boy in their class who was disruptive and unusual. The parents of the child himself were completely in denial about what the poor boy was going through. And of course, he was always in trouble. What became clear was that I had the skills to do the job, but I didn't have the life experience to really understand the complex emotional experience that the parents and the school were having. And fundamentally, they were all my clients. After a year and a half of struggling and not feeling like I was helping this child, the school, or the parents at all, I resigned. And I was quite disheartened. In fact, I think I was probably clinically depressed. And I thought at that time that maybe psychology was not, in fact, for me. Maybe a counselor, a coach wasn't my future. And so I did what many kids do in their early 20s when they don't know what to do with their lives. I packed my bags and I went traveling. I moved to Asia, I moved to Taiwan, and I got a job teaching English. And I stayed there for about 2 years, traveling the country and gaining life experience. And when I got home 2 years later, I sort of fell into this business career. And quite quickly, things started to progress well. I would get another promotion, I would get a new job, I would get a better salary. And for about the next 7 years, I thought that business was actually going to be my life's work, and that psychology was just the route that I took to get in. Except that an unusual thing started to happen when I was in my early 30s. About every 2 to 3 years, I would experience this deep depression, this sense of not being able to get out of bed in the morning, not being able to fathom going back to the workplace that I was in. And about every 2 years, like the universe so often does, when you want something, it gives it to you one way or another, I would lose that job. Whether the startup I was with would go under, or I would find a new job somewhere else, the grass seemed greener on the other side of the fence, I would end up in a period of unemployment for a short time. And each time this happened, when I was unemployed, I would ask myself, is this the time I go back to psychology? Is this the time I go back and become my best self? Do the thing that I've always wanted to do and always known I was meant to do. But something would happen each time. Fear would rise up. And I would have all of these beliefs that would come into my head that would convince me it wasn't what I wanted. I would think, I'm too old to start a new career at this point. I'm not going to be able to pay my mortgage. I'm not good enough. What if I fail at the one thing I always wanted to do most? And so I would take another job and I would go back into the workforce. And it would happen again. The pattern happened 4 times, and it wasn't until the last time, the 5th time that it happened, that I realized the pattern was actually an opportunity. The pattern was the universe bashing me over the head and telling me that if I didn't finally become a coach, go back into psychology and do what I always knew I meant to do, I would never truly be happy. And I'm now a purpose and performance coach. Something else really interesting happened as I started my coaching practice. And that was that I started to get really interested in intuition. And I was interested in intuition mostly because throughout my life, I always thought that I was making my decisions based on my intuitive wisdom. I was proud of it. I talked about it. I was proud that I took the road less traveled most of the time. And as I started to coach others, I started to see a similar pattern in people's lives. And I started to do a bit of analysis on the major decisions that I had made in my life that moved my life massively forward, or either held me back or kept me stuck in a place that I was. And over the analysis and over the last 20 years of my life, what I realized is that all of the decisions that I made that really massively drove my life forward were decisions I made based on my intuitive wisdom. But when I made decisions based on my fear, my life stood still. And with this information, I created the Intuition Principle and the Intuition Principle Coaching Program. But just an example of this was in my early 30s. Unfortunately, I entered a marriage that didn't ultimately work. When the marriage ended 2 years after, I was alone in New Zealand. I was homeless. I had no family. I had a job, but I didn't really have a connection to the country. And I was devastated. Now, what most people would have done is they would have gone home. They would have gone home to their parents, to their friends, to those that loved them and wanted to take care of them. Something didn't feel right about that decision for me. Something told me that I needed to move to Australia, that there was something there that I needed to find out and experience. So alone, I moved myself to Australia, another foreign country that I had never been to. And it was that single decision that translated into a job that tripled my salary in 2 years, that allowed me to buy myself and my struggling parents a home, and eventually take my sick sister in and take care of her for 3 years. It was also the decision that allowed me to step away from the corporate space and become a performance coach that I am now. And these are the decisions, using intuitive wisdom, that I help teach and train my clients to be able to identify and take advantage of.